just to explain this evening a combination of originally the Yortzeit of the Nirtzochim, those who were killed a year ago in Har Nov. We're also approaching Hanukkah. Kislev is Hanukkah time. And if I just start with mentioning this Friday, the world, or Europe, was rocked, Friday night that is, rocked by terrorist attacks, unbelievable terrorist attacks. Now, I know that most of you here are probably Americans. Europe is a little bit out of, it's not exactly something that you feel so familiar with. It was a terrible day, mainly for us because a father and a son were shot in cold blood. The whole family was riddled with bullets on the way to a chasna week. And this news from Europe does rock the boat somewhat. 130 people killed, 300 people wounded. These are big numbers. It doesn't happen in Europe. In France, those are from England, especially those who are from France. The world is in a mess. Now, everyone can and does explain and rationalize why they're Arab terrorists, why there are problems in this country and that country and so forth. But if you look with at the general picture, with the big eye, the big look, the world is in a massive mess. Hundreds and thousands of people are dying in all countries for all different reasons, whether it's natural disasters or man-made disasters or terrorism or wars. It doesn't really make sense. The hopeful 60s, which some of you were alive for, the hopes evaporated. Advanced world, we've got technology, we are liberal, democratic, psychological, there are probably some psychologists sitting here even. So surely we've finished with wars and conflicts and killings and so on and so forth. Surely it's finished. It doesn't really make sense. Probably the biggest mess, more or less, we've had, because the ability to kill, mass murder, bigger ways, larger ways, better ways, if you're allowed to say better ways. So what's going on? What's going on? I remember when I was a young lad, a boy in yeshiva, I was driving, actually I was in England at the time, driving down a road. This was before the world as you know it. Some of you, no mobile phones. We're talking about when phones you had to use your finger to dial. And one of the first of the following incidents happened. I was speeding down a road, and a policeman stepped out behind a tree and shot me with a radar gun. It was a very big one because in those days, like computers, it was a big radar gun. He caught me speeding. Well, he thought he did anyway. And this was the first time I've ever seen such a thing. Nowadays, you've got speed cameras, it's sort of normal, but this was the first one, more or less. And I noticed that after I turned the corner and I slowed down and got all nervy, by the time I'd sort of gone another 500 meters, I started speeding up again, and off I went on my usual miles per hour. We won't tell you what that is, but it was my usual way of driving. And I wrote a letter to the Mashgiach Zichrono Livrocha, Reb Wolbe, because I was in his yeshiva, and I wrote him a letter that apparently the world has advanced technologically, amazingly. A policeman can step out and shoot with a radar, and he's got how fast you were traveling. Yet the development of Adam, the Mensch, they haven't trained me not to drive fast. They didn't develop man would understand it's dangerous, it's irresponsible, things can happen. That not. Technology, science, as it were, the building of the world, the civilized world, really developed, really advanced, as never before. Has Mensch, man himself, advanced? Has he changed, been trained? No. So if you don't change man and you develop amazingly powerful weapons, then you will have amazingly powerful conflicts. But there's more to it than that. As we said, we're approaching Hanukkah. We're approaching Hanukkah. What are some of the yesodos, some of the main ideas that we're presented with at Hanukkah time? We know that the Yevonim, the Greeks, wanted to uproot, as it were, our connection to God and His Torah. They particularly focused on, aimed at Shabbos, at Bris Milah, at the Milah, circumcision, and Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, the new month. They had many, many other gezeros, many, many other edicts that they tried to impose on Klal Yisrael, on the Jews. We are in Golus. The title of this presentation is Women, Redemption. We are in Golus. We are in exile. We need redeeming. In order to understand Golus, exile, and redemption, we need to understand the mahus, the identity of what is this Golus about. What does it mean being in Golus, being in exile? How does this work from a Torah perspective? Not from a physical perspective, but if we look at the underlying theme of how does God run the world and put the Jews in exile, what is it for? How does that work? Well, one of the yesodos, one of the main ideas is that Golus, exile, represents the victory, the control of the alien power over the nation in exile. But not only the physical power, the spiritual power. It's a very interesting dynamic. First, the Jews have a flaw. And the flaw is echoed by one of the other nations, the alien nations, so to speak, that God set up in the world. That is a flaw. Because we're losing, we're offending, we're weakening, that allows the other nation to overcome us, to have a shlita, to control us. And then we go physically into exile. And when we're physically in exile, then we have to face this whole culture. And then we're challenged to do something about it. And then if we throw off that culture, the culture of that exile, of that Golus, then it works backwards. The Rabbeinu Shloim, God says, you have now survived, you've gone through the test, you've passed the test, I will now pull you out, and now He redeems you. If ladies, if women want to redeem the Jews, Klal Yisrael, they need to know, what do we need to be redeemed from? And you should know something. To redeem, even if we don't actually physically become redeemed, if we don't see the Moshiach straight away, the redemption straight away, but this is how you prepare for it. If you resist the force of the Golus, then A, that brings the Geula closer, the redemption sooner. But B, it allows you to be prepared. You are actually redeemed yourself. You are a little Geula. I think there's a shop called Little Geula. You yourselves are little Geula. You're little redemptions. And you're ready, you're there. So let's just look again at Yavon. What was their idea? We have the four Golios, the famous four Golios. Bovel, Parasamodai, which is Bovel, Parasamodai, the Medes and the Persians, Yavon, the Greeks, and Edom, finally the Romans, and that's what we are in at the moment, and add on the fifth element called Yishmael. But if we focus on the Greeks, we see as follows something very interesting. You all know the halacha, that we put the Hanukkah candles or lights on the door of the house, outside the door. But Pesach beisoy mibachutz. Outside the door, that's where we light the candles. Many times I've spoken, particularly to younger couples, that in order to put it on a Pesach of the bayis, you have to have a bayis. You can't put it on the door of a house if you haven't built a house. You have to have first a house, and then you can have the door of a house. What is significant about the door of a house? Bayis in Hebrew means inside. Mi bayis mi bachutz. It says for instance, one of the first time we have this mentioned is Tevas Noach, Noach's ark. Inside and outside, it was covered, so to speak, with zephet, with pitch. Bayis umi bachutz. Inside and outside. Bayis, the word house means there's an inside. That's what a house is. It has an inside, it has 4 walls. However many walls it has, it's got an inside, and there's something outside. A bayis is also a place where you belong. On the Choshen Mishpot, it had bayis. That's the bayis. The bayis, Vayaslem Batim, it says in Parsha Shmois. They were made, they were created, they were given as a present batim. Who was given a present? Miriam and Yocheved were given, the 2 heroines were given batim, bote kun and bote levia, places where they belong. This is your bias, is your setting. The jewel is in a bias, it's in its setting, it's its place, it's mokoim. Bias. If you look, an interesting theme we see by Golus Yovon, by the Greek, the power of the Greeks, which still survives nowadays. In fact, it's probably its most potent, powerful form nowadays. The Greeks did not accept bias. We don't want an inside and an outside. We don't want there should be anything inside. We're going to break open. It says they had 13 piritzos they made in the walls of the Beis Avigdor. They made 13 gaps, breaks. They broke through. They don't want something inside. We don't want you to have what we call in Lashon HaKodesh pnimius. We want everything to be open, broken open. We'll smash our way in. And beremes, because this is an inyan of subtlety, we find one of the gezeros of the Greeks, one of their edicts was that women, when they would get married, and here we're getting a reference to this young lady who's going to get married without a father now, without a brother, on the night of their wedding, they were taken to the Greek officer. That was the edict. Droit de seigneur in English or French. That was their edict. There's a very interesting lashon in the Gemara, very interesting language used in the Gemara. Mitzad halacha, from the halachic perspective, this woman, she has done nothing wrong. She's helpless. She's helpless. There is no criticism of that woman. She's allowed to be taken. That's the halacha. In the Gemara in Ksubas tells us that they made a special gzeira. Chazal had to intervene because of the tznuos. Because there were ladies who were called tznuos who refused to give themselves up. And they died. They were killed. They added on, they did something more. And I always query now, why were they called tznuos? What is tznuah about that? Any woman would not want this to happen to her. Any woman would not want such a thing. Only a tzniah-sticker woman? Only someone who has this sort of modesty? Why were they called tznuos? The tznuos would not allow this to happen, and they died, el kiddush Hashem, and that was one of the gezeros. That is one of the reasons, Rebbetzins, why Hanukkah is relevant to women. Av hein hoyub oisoines. Women were included in the Geula. What was the Geula from? From this edict. So one of the heroic, unnamed women in Jewish history are these women who gave up their lives for this violation not to happen to them. Snuos. Why were they snuos? Why were they snuos? Why were they called modest? It's a very Greek thing. They want to break in. They want to break in. Not let you and your husband be who you are. Want to break in. Want to come into your makom, come into your place. We want to get inside the door. That's why I have the Hanukkah lights outside the door. You can't come in. It's ours. We have an inside. We have a bias. We once explained tznius as follows. Tznius means modesty was actually the first issue in the world for man. Odom Arishon, or the Nochosh, if you like, there was an issue of tznius before there was good or bad. Listen carefully. Before there was good or bad in the world, there was an issue of modesty. What does that mean? Before there was a Yetzer Hara for bad, before there was a differentiation between good and bad, there was tznius and not tznius. We see that from the Nochosh in Parshas Bereishis. What does it mean? Tznius, before there's good or bad. So let me explain. The way we view the world, the chush, the sense, that is the first, the major, the most prominent of all our senses is our sight. That's how you perceive. Someone who can't see is choshev kameis. You live in a world and you look at things, you see things, you perceive things. That's your first approach to any object is through sight. That's the first, then you can touch it, you can hear it, you can taste it, you can smell it. But the furthest away, if you like, is sight. So understanding of the world comes through sight. Everything in this world was made by God with kedusha, with holiness, with a purpose. An inner holy purpose. Everything in this world has a dimension, can be seen. If you look at the object first, then you're already making a mistake. Because that's not what the object really is. It looks like a table, but it's not really a table. There's kedusha there. Of course, it is a table, but what's the point of a table? What's it there for? What's the kedusha of a table? What's the holiness? What's its tachlis in the world? Why is this table in the world? What did God put wood in the world, etc., etc.? But the way I approach it, it looks like a table. And then I've got to start discovering what's its ultimate purpose, what it really is, why it's really existing, what it's really created for. But my first approach is through sight. And that causes a mistake. Because as soon as we see something, we see the surface. We see superficially. And we understand that is the world. If, when we approach that, let's take a person now, because we'll get closer to home. Let's take a person. If you would think about the person first, before you saw who they were, you'd have a much better approach, much more correct, much purer approach to who the person is. But no, first we see the person, and then they make an impression. What we've seen. Are they beautiful? Are they ugly? Are they tall, small, etc., etc.? Have they got a nice face? Do they frown? Are they sulky, surly, and so on and so forth? And this all comes from our perception, the initial perception. And then we start meeting them. They might be much nicer, better, much better than we thought at the beginning. So our initial approach of sight is, by the way, usually wrong. And that's where tznius comes even before ra and tov, good and bad. It comes right at the beginning. The way you look at things. Either you look at it, if you like, through a spiritual eye, or you look at it through a physical eye. And if you look through a physical eye, you're going to make many, many mistakes. We often ask the question, those women have heard me sometimes talk about this. The Nochosh, the snake, was described as Orum. Orum means unclothed, naked. On the other hand, Orum means manipulative, sly, lying, and cunning. And we would, if we looked at the source of words, the shiroshim, the roots of words, we would say this does not make sense. It's totally the opposite. Someone totally unclothed, you could see everything. You could see who they are. Someone who's clothed, that's where you get cunning and manipulative, because then you could cover yourself and you can look like you're wearing a mask, and you can wear a mask of makeup or whatever it is. You could be somebody totally different. So only when a person or an object is totally exposed, that's where you see the truth. So how can the word exposed, unclothed, unclad, mean simultaneously manipulative, cunning, and sly, the nochosh? And the answer is, as I've said before, looking at an object through your eyes and then understanding it through your eyes is a mabat chitzoni. It's an external understanding, a superficial view, perspective, and understanding of that object. Once you cover an object, then one understands there's something underneath. This isn't the object, there's covering. There's something underneath. So maybe there's something more underneath and more underneath that. And maybe there's some depth there, something else other than I thought. And that totally applies to tznius, particularly with women. Unclothed draws one automatically on a physical way of looking at a person. Clothed, so then you understand there's a person underneath. Maybe there's a personality underneath, not only a person. Maybe there's a brain there. Maybe there's an neshama there. So something which is unclothed and exposed, it's a lie. That's not really what it is. Because you hit so hard by the visual aspect that you don't really expect, you don't delve deeper, you don't understand the deeper aspect of that person. The Greeks were great into beauty. Yeftelikim liyefes. In all the parshos, in all the what we're reading at the moment in the Sefer Torah, in the Torah, every week, our weekly portion, we're not talking about yofes, we're talking about the combination between Shem, the Semites, and Chom, and Ham, as they say in English. All the Pelishtim, and the Mitzvim, and the Ches, all these are Shem and Chom, all the way through Parshas Bereshis, Sefer Bereshis. The whole book of Bereshis is like, Genesis is like that. We don't really meet Yofes, we don't meet Japheth, the sons of Japheth, we don't meet them till much later on in history. The Yevonim. Yofes is the word means beauty. It's the external. But it's not only in beauty and external, if you like, beautiful object, a beautiful woman, a beautiful man, etc. That's not only what it is. It's the chokhmah even of Yavon is external chokhmah. The knowledge of Yavon, the civilization of Yavon is external civilization. It's an chokhmah, but goyim, but edoim tamin. Believe that the non-Jews, the exile world that we live in, has chokhmah, has knowledge, has understanding, has science, no question, and it's correct. But it is, as when it comes to Torah, it's an external, it's bachutz, it's a superficial chokhmah which works, but it's not actually getting there. It'll shoot a radar at me, but it won't actually change me. Because Torah is the chokhmah of pnim. Torah is the chokhmah of the inside, the real inside, the genuine inside. And that's what they couldn't stand. They had to break in because we can't accept. We are smart, we have knowledge, we are philosophers, we run the world, we understand the world. We cannot accept the things we can't understand. We won't accept that. Because we see the whole world, we understand the whole world, we grasp the whole world, it's visual, and it's our understanding, it's human understanding. We're not going to accept there's anything really inside more than that we can actually absorb and understand and cope with and develop. And this can't be like that. And therefore, we're going to start up with you. Because you've got this claim that there's something more to life than that. There's an inside. There's a God. There's Torah. There's Pnimius. There's an inner person. There's spirituality inside. There's an neshama. We don't want that. We won't accept that. We'll break through that. We don't like Shabbos. It's another day of the week. Don't tell me it's something else. We don't like Mila, which is against Taiva, which is against all immorality. We don't like that. It's against lust. We like lust because we understand it. We function with it. We don't like stopping lust, and so on and so forth. And they had this gzeira, the droit de seigneur. We don't want you to have a house and to stay inside your house and to have your place. We're going to break in. And this is one of the ways we're going to break in. And it won't be precious and special. We'll break in. There is nothing special. And they couldn't stand the speciality, the uniqueness of Yiddishkeit of the Yidden. That's the exile we are in. I've said many times to some of the women sitting here that if you look at the Oroin in the Beis Avigdor was made of gold and wood and gold, 3 boxes. And Chazal tell us, the rabbis tell us, why was it made of 3 boxes? Gold and wood and gold, to tell us that a person needs to have a Talmud Chacham, someone who's worth his weight in gold, has to have his outside and his inside matching, gold outside and gold inside. Toich choy kabaroi, the toich, the outside, the inside needs to match. And we always ask the very good question, so why didn't they make it out of solid gold? Solid gold. Definitely the inside and the outside match. It's total gold. And we've answered many times, no, you need to have an inside and an outside, and you need to have a mechitz in between. You can't live your heart on your sleeve. Everything that you know, everything you are, everyone understands, sees totally, that's when you're living on the outside. You can't only live on the inside. Only on the inside and have nothing to do with the world. You need to have an inside and an outside, a pnimius and a chitzonius, a bayis and mibachutz. You need to have the mokoim inside to be sustained by an inside which is sneers, and you need to be able to live in the outside world as well, but it has to match, has to both be gold. Toichai kabaroi. That's the remez of the Orin. Someone who doesn't have an inside is going to be totally traumatized by the events in the world. Because if you only live on the outside, then everything that happens in the world, every event, every murder, every bit of chaos and panic will draw you this way and that, because that's all there is. That's all there is. Someone who has an inside has a different world inside them. I've got an inside. And in my inside world, I'm connected to Rabbi Shalom, to God, to the Jews, to my family, to my house, to my Torah. Often it's said that men have Torah and women have tznius. It's often been said. Men have Torah and women have tznius. One of the ways this connects is as follows. You see, if you live in the outside world, I'll give you an example. In halacha, and if I actually deal with the tznius of a woman, the tznius of a woman, having taught for many, many years young ladies, both in halacha and hashkafa, acknowledging that there is a big yetzer hara in the world to be not so tzniustic, acknowledging that. But I think the main reason why it's very, very hard for girls, women, whatever age, to change their look is not because of yetzer hara, what we would call of taiva, of desire, of lust. That's not the problem. That's not the reason. It's because of culture. I came to this conclusion many, many years ago, teaching girls, telling them, and they were good girls, listening to every other halacha I taught, but if I would tell them one halacha in tznius, one halacha, just wear this or don't do that, they'd still come down the next day that, and I couldn't understand. I've taught them Hilchas Shabbos, they listened. Hilchas Kashrus, they listened. Hilchas every other thing, they listened. This one, all of a sudden, not. Why was it so? We had this whole panel, if you like. Why is it so hard? And it's not because of boys. Excuse me for being blunt. It's not because of boys. It's because you don't want to look not with it. I don't want to look. Not the look that is around. And this explains to me a very, very interesting posuk. The posuk says, Loi sachnifu es ha'oretz. Loi sachnifu is, chanifa is a loisase, a lav in the Torah means it's an offense in the Torah. Do not, chanfen, I don't know how we say in English, flatter the land. Flattery means to make up to someone, to approve of bad things. What has it got to do with the land? This has nothing to do. It's not a mitzvah. It's not one of the commandments, hatluyes borish, but it depends on the land. It's a social commandment between people. So why does it say, loy sachnifu? It should say, loy sachnifu. Do not flatter. What does it mean? Es oretz. You're flattering the land. How do you flatter a land? And I came to the conclusion, the pshat is like this. The answer lies as follows. the problem, the yetzer, the desire to flatter, and we're talking about flattering, to approve of misdemeanors, of bad behavior, is always because of peer pressure. There's a challenge. Do you care more about your God or more about what people think? And that's why it's such a heinous crime. Lo sachnif es haaretz. And you'll get kicked out, you'll get thrown out of Eretz Yisrael, out of the land of Israel, if you do chanifa. Why is it so heinous? Because what you're saying is it's more important how people view me, that I impress people, that they approve of me, than God approves of me. And therefore, if the culture and the society have set up this standard, and we all do like this, I'm not going to break with it, I'm not going to protest. I'm going to accept it, acknowledge it, be part of it. It's too hard, because everyone will look at me as the odd one out, as the campaigner, as the moral protester, whatever it is, and I don't want to be that. Oh, the Rabbi Shalom, God does want you. No, I care more about what people think than what God thinks. Lo sachnif es haaretz. Why is it the haaretz? Because every neighborhood, every area, every land has their own culture. And now this particularly applies to tznius for women. Because the hardest thing to combat, to fight against, is style, is fashion, what everyone is wearing. I cannot look not with it. I cannot not look like what everyone wants, what everyone's doing. That's too hard. That's what bothered the girls the most, in my opinion. And I know I'm right in that. It wasn't boys, it wasn't the yetzer. This was the problem. It's how you have to look with it. This is how I present myself. Now listen carefully. It's very, very hard. Lo sachnim is very, very hard. Lo sachnim is very, very hard. Well, I'll explain. The way this works is very simple. Tznius means I have an inner world. If you are living on the outer world, then it is impossibly hard, inconceivably hard. You cannot change it. Because if I'm only an outer person, and my sustenance, the way I thrive, what I thrive on, where I grow, where I live, what I understand is always on the outside, is always the superficial, is always the chitza in the chutz. Then this is going to be a major problem, because how can you be different? You are on the outside, you live on the outside, you sustain on the outside. This is your world, you cannot be different. Someone who's built an inner world, who's got a toich, can be different. But someone who has an inside can resist the pressure of outside. So the way you develop that is by getting pnimius. That is equal to what a man does in Torah, because we're saying you've got to live in one world. Which world do you live in? If you live in the outside world, in the culture of the outside world, you're in trouble. What does a man do? He lives in Torah, if he can. It's a whole world, Torah. It's a whole inner world. You can live in Torah with all the mitzvahs and all the halachas and all the learning he does. He's got a world he lives in. He's got his koil world, etc. It's a whole world. So then he doesn't have to care about what happens on the outside that much. He's not so influenced, not so bothered. That's where Torah and tznius meet. A woman has the same thing. You can't do it in Torah. You're not supposed to sit and learn the whole day. But you can do it in tznius. You can have an inner world. Building an inner world. Real kesher with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That gives you a koyach. That gives you power to resist outer cultures. Lo sachnifu, you won't be flattered. You won't fall. You won't stumble because the outside world does what it does. That is redemption from a golus called Yovon. That is redemption from an exile called the Greeks. Because this is what they do. And they have developed a fantastic world. And they've created major, major technological advances in all things, in fashion as well. It's their world. If I don't have an inner world, then I can't combat that. Then I'm going to be part of that and swept away with that. And it's the same thing when it comes to our tzoras that we have nowadays. And the same thing when it comes to panic and chaos and despair from the world. You have an inner world, you have a kesh, you have somewhere you can survive. If you look with the outer eye, the world is in such a total mess, there is no way out. Might as well give up now. And just run around and try to enjoy yourself as much as you can. It looks like that. All the little theories they have never work. Nothing seems to work. That's if you live in the outer world. If you have an inner world, there's something happening, something going on. I brought a very interesting posuk And a very interesting period from Mishnah, and I'll finish with this point. Last year, for the tzibur who I was speaking to in Hanof, when these terrible, shocking events happened, right in the middle of a shul, right inside a shul, on the inside of Pneumius. And this actually follows the thinking that we're talking about now. You can look at what is success, what is achievement, what is victory. Well, there's two ways of looking. There's my outside eye, my inside eye. There's two ways of looking at victory. What is victory? And I queried when Nebuch, these 5 people were killed in a shul by murderous Arabs. Who won at that point? Who won? Depends how you look. If you look with the outer eye, they won. Because physically speaking, he took a knife and this person's dead. And that's terrible tsar. No denying the tragedy, no denying the tsar. They won. But there's an inner eye. And only if you have the inner eye, only if you have tznius and pneumius, can you actually understand this, what I'm going to say now. I'm going to read you a Medrash Tehillim, which I found. I take credit for this Medrash Tehillim because no one else, as far as I know, quoted it. It's an amazing Medrash Tehillim on the Pasuk, Eile vorecha veile vasusim v'anachnu b'shem Hashem Elokeinu nazkir. Eile vorecha, these come with their rechev, with their chariots. Veile vasusim, these come with their horses, tanks, swords. And we, as it were, we mention God's name, we pray to God. They will bow, they will fall down, and we will be upstanding. What does that mean? That's normally assumed, the classic interpretation almost of everyone, all the Midrashim, all the Chazalim, all the rabbis, and all the Perushim. The classic interpretation is the Goyim, the non-Jews, they use power, they use tanks, they use airplanes, they use bombs, knives and guns. And we fight back with Torah. Kol kol Yankov Yadayim Esav. The hands of Esav are hitting us. And the Kol kol Yankov, and we have the voice of Yaakov, which is the Kol of Torah, the Kol of Tehillim, that ladies say, the Kol of Chesed, the Kol of Tefillah. And this is the fight and the battle. And we're going to win. We're going to beat them, ultimately. That's how we understand. But the Medrash says a totally different point. You can only understand this if you've followed my thinking so far, that there are two ways to view the world. An outer way and an inner way. The outer way, they win. It says like this. I've been surrounded by people, chayve misa, who are liable for death. Hachavulim lamoves, on the way, they're actually carrying off themselves to die. Dova ache, another pshat, another way of understanding it. Chevle moves, kmo chaval nevim, chavole shoil. Chevle rishoim, groups of rishoim. I'm surrounded by enemies, evil, nasty, bad people. Umitzorei this is in Tehillim. This is we say in Hallel. We'll be saying 8 days of Hallel on Hanukkah, and this is our victory Pian, that's our victory chant. Hallel. Well, listen what the Hallel is saying. In Golus. This is Hallel in Golus. There's Hallel when you're not in Golus, but Hallel in Golus in exile. These are the 4 Malchios, the 4 Golios, the 4 exiles, the 4 kingships, so to speak, as we mentioned. Babel, Porosamodai, Yavon, and Edom. The Babylons, the Medes, the Greeks, and the Romans. These are the Malchios. Shenema miad Shaul efdein. I will release them from Shaul. That's the word. Shaul means the Malchios, the Shibud Malchios, the exile we are facing. Tzara v'yogen emtzo v'shem Hashem ekro. Tzara v'yogen emtzo. I will find tsar, pain, weeping, avelus, v'shem Hashem ekro, and I will call out in the name of Hashem. What will happen? Does that mean we're going to win? Practically speaking, listen to what the Medrash continues. What does it mean of Hashem Hashem Ekro? That we're going to say, Baruch Thine Emes. Blessed is God who is righteous and just, even when we're faced with tragedy. We're always going to call out in your name. Shenema, as it says, Eile v'rechev, ve'eile v'asusim, It doesn't mean we're going to win, particularly. Even if we lose, even even in Avelus, we say Baruch Dainemes. We b'Shem Hashem Elokeinu Nazke. We say God's name, which means it looks like you've won because to the outer eye, to the ayin achitzoy, to the left eye, it looks like, wow, they've killed us, they've destroyed us, they're winning. But the inner eye says, the Rabbi Shalom says, you say Baruch Dainemes, you've won. You're emunah, you're bitochen. You have an inner world, you have sustained by that. It could be they're nebuch, people are getting massacred and killed, and that's tzorahs, that's terrible, unbelievable anguish, no question. But b'Shem Hashem Elokeinu Nazke, we still mention God's name. That is our ultimate victory, because all we're looking at is ultimate victory. So you come like that and you think you've won. You didn't win. We say Baruch Dainemes. We say, Rabbi Shalom, we pray to you. We're still in touch with you. We understand there's exile. There will be a gula. We daven for the gula. We bring the gula closer. We bring redemption closer. We have an inner world. We have tznias. We have an understanding of the world. That's how we're going to bring the gula closer in the time of the Yevonim, this time of Hanukkah. Because Eilev Orechev, they'll come like they come. They'll look at the outside world and they'll bring their technology and their mass murder and they'll do all their nasty things, etc. But we stay strong, and Klal Yisrael, the Jews, stay strong forever, for Netzach. We mention God's name, we daven, we pray, Baruch Dainemes, we say Hallelujah, even at the time of Tzoros. Our inner world is much stronger than any outer world they can throw at us. And Be'ez Hashem, if we learn something from what I've said, Be'ez Hashem, we take upon ourselves an increase in innerness, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will see that. And just like we are goyel ourselves, we redeem ourselves from this facet of the golus, of the exile, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will show us, finally, take away all the goluyos, take away the mamlichos, and be zeicher to geula shleima. Have a good night.